Welcome again to the shop. I'm really glad that you're watching today's video, and before I get into things, I just want to remind you, as always, to please click on subscribe, and if you have a notification button, click on that too, and you're going to want to do that because this is the first of a 3-part series. So for the next 3 episodes, I'll be focusing on a comparison between the Boox Tab Ultra C and the Bigme Inknote Color Plus. Now let's give a little bit of context on these two devices. The Bigme device was the very first device to be released that featured Kaleido 3. And roughly a month or so later, the Boox, the Tab Ultra C was announced and released and also featured Kaleido 3. So these are the first 2 Kaleido 3 devices. I think it's fair to say that the energy around the Boox device was unmatched by any other device, e-ink note-taking device that is, in a long time. There's been a tremendous buzz around that particular product, and it remains, I think, the hottest note-taking device as of this viewing. The Inknote was first to the party, but it didn't make much of a splash, and so it didn't get the press or the attention, and that's partly to do with the fact that Bigme is a much smaller player, at least in America, in the e-note-taking space, and Boox, of course, is arguably the biggest. You know, we're a bit opaque in terms of actual sales numbers. Remarkable 2 is probably the best-selling e-note-taking device, I would imagine, but in aggregate, I wouldn't be surprised if Boox sells more devices. And so it was natural for the Boox device to get a lot more attention than the Bigme device. But now I own both of them, and I've had the opportunity to do extensive testing amongst a range of categories, 15 in total, and I'm going to spend the next 3 weeks comparing those 2 devices. Now, before we get into that, let me set the stage on why this might be relevant to you as a viewer. The Bigme Inknote Plus retails for $700, and the Boox Tab Ultra C retails for $600. If you buy both directly from their respective companies, they both come with cases and the stylus. So those are very comparable packages, with the Bigme costing $100 more. I think Bigme was caught off guard when Boox released the Tab Ultra C at the price point they did, and they really, frankly, made the the Inknote Plus irrelevant. I like my Inknote Plus device. You'll see that as we go through this video, but at that price range, there's no question that the Tab Ultra C is the better product to buy. Hands down. However, Bigme released a subsequent model in reaction, I believe, to what Boox did, called the Bigme Inkote Color Light, and that retails for $500. There were only 2 differences between the Light and the Plus model. That was RAM, that went from 6 GB to 4 GB, and then the storage capacity dropped from one to the other, and I don't remember that exact number. You'd have to look it up. But neither of those changes, I think, are actually that significant. Of course, that depends on your storage needs, although I will point out that the Bigme, both models have expandable storage as needed. But the point I'm trying to make here is that now there is an interesting dynamic between the Inknote Lite and the Tab Ultra C. The Inknote being $100 less becomes a lot more compelling. And the purpose of this series of videos is to kind of highlight what the strengths are of each device, and for you as the viewer, what is the device that might fit your needs better. If you buy the Inknote Lite, you'll be spending $100 less than if you buy the Tab C. But what are you giving up? What could you get for that extra $100? And does that make it worth it? So that's what this video is really trying to explore. So one thing I'll be doing in this video is I'm going to go over a grid of the 15 categories, and I'll be ranking them. At the end of the day, I'll be declaring a winner. And that's partly because it's fun to do that, and I think it makes it more interesting. What's more important, though, for you as a viewer is to pay attention to the details. And if you're thinking whether to buy either device, think less about how I'm scoring things and more about how you would use the device, and then compare that to what you're seeing in the video. I think you'll find that to be helpful, and hopefully that helps you make the right decision about which device to buy. I do think ultimately the comparison between these two devices did surprise me. And of course, again, I'm using the Inknote Plus as a proxy in this case for the Inknote Lite, which I think is fair to do. But I was definitely surprised at a lot of the results in some ways and not surprised in others. So I think it'll be an interesting journey, and I hope you enjoy it. And well, let's get to it. This is the scorecard we'll be using for this comparison, including all 15 elements that we'll be reviewing and in which episode. Let's start off just by looking at the devices themselves and their UI and a couple of elements of each. First off, both are using Kaleido 3 screens. The dimensions are identical. There seems to be a little bit of a difference in the shading of the background, but it's subtle and it doesn't really mean much to me anyway. I think they're just different and neither has an advantage. So the screens themselves are both pretty good, and yeah, I kind of give them a tie for that category. So the screen, which makes sense. They're using the exact same screen, and you would expect it to be the same experience, and predominantly it is. If you look at the systems and the UI of each device, they're a little different. I'm not sure one is better than the other. We're looking at maybe a traditional app tray with the Inknote Plus. The Ultra C uses more of an Android feel, so you've got your apps on your screen, but you also have a tray on the bottom, and you have the ability to do widgets. If you're into widgets, you might find that to be a superior experience. I don't think they add much, personally, to the experience, but that's just a personal choice. Certainly you have widgets rather, with the Ultra, and you don't have those with the Inknote Plus. But to me, it's 6-to-1. I don't really see much of an advantage to that. Both have snappy UIs. You can pretty much pull down the menu bar pretty easily. They all have very similar functionality. I think Inknote has done a lot to try to look as much like books as possible, and they've succeeded in that regard. Yeah, both very snappy. You can go into the ink centers of each fairly quickly. The one thing I will say about the e-ink centers is that I think both devices do a great job of pretending they have a lot more options than they have. So you can see over here for the Inknote Plus, there's these 5 broad refresh modes going from HD 256 down to Regal. My personal experience is HD, 256, HD, and Regal are all pretty much the same. I didn't see a lot of differences between those as I was playing with them in different apps. And then normal and extreme were different. So in my mind, it's really 2 different experiences as opposed to 5. And the same thing can be said for the Ultra C. We actually see 4 refresh options here. Some apps have 5, but it's the exact same situation. HD and Regal is in one camp, and then Balance Fast and Ultra Fast are in another camp, and I can't tell much of a difference within each of the 2 camps. So effectively, there's 2 different e-ink refresh rates, modes rather, on each device. At least that's the way that I see it. So they're equivalent in that regard. So I would say, broadly speaking, the UI on both are about the same, and the system's about the same, and the screen's about the same. So I don't really see any tangible difference between either device in that regard. Let's take a look at front lighting and see how that works. I do appreciate, and this is just a personal choice, but I like having separate activation switches for warm and cold light. The Ultra C does a different method. They do a sliding scale, I'm sorry, it's right here, where it's cold light if you're at the very left point, and it's warm light if you're on the very right, and then any point in between is a mix. Again, I prefer this mode, but for review purposes, it's a tie. It just comes down to preference. But let's go ahead and test out what it looks like to be. We'll go max cold light on this device. There we go. And we'll go max cold light here as well. Slightly different. The Inknote Plus looks a little bit brighter. The Ultra C looks a little more muted, but honestly, functionally, they're both perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and look at what the warm light looks like. Okay, a little more orange, a little bolder on the Inknote Plus. Again, a little more muted on the Ultra C, but honestly, it's just a personal preference thing. They're both quite good. Let's go ahead and go midpoint. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. Yeah, and then we'll go midpoint here and here roughly. Yeah, that's about right. Interesting. Now, suddenly, with both lights on, the Ultra C becomes a brighter front lighting, and the Inknote Plus is muted in that case. It's perfectly fine. I think that it's a tie. It just comes down to preference, and you can set lighting to whatever level you want, really, on either device. I don't think there's an advantage here. They both do it differently, but they both do it perfectly acceptably. So nothing to say there. All right, let's go ahead and turn off front lighting on each. So I would say a tie there as well. One area that isn't a tie, though, is around the device itself. The form factor of the Inknote Plus, I actually prefer it. It's basically the same weight as the Boox Ultra C, but it doesn't feel like it's the same weight. It distributes the weight much more evenly, and that might be because the device itself is actually a little bit larger, right? The screen sizes are identical, but this left section is a little bit bigger on the Inknote Plus. That's just a theory I have. The Boox definitely, it just feels heavier. Some people may like that. They may make them feel like it's more of a premium experience, but I do tend to prefer the Inknote Plus. In addition to that, the fact that and I don't know if I can capture this on the screen, let me see there. The camera comes out in this bump is a really horrible form factor, and that's not the case with the Inknote Plus, which is more flush. So for those reasons, both the distribution of the weight and the a flush camera on the Inknote Plus, for that particular category, I'm going to give the advantage to the Inknote Plus. But all other things about these two devices are virtually identical, from the system UI to the screen itself, and etc., and the front lighting. It's just, they're very comparable devices, and they stand up to each other quite well. We've covered a lot of ground already, mostly a tie between the two devices, but a short early lead for the Inknote Plus. So next, let's talk about the styluses, or styli, I guess, that comes with each device. Both are Wacom, and what that means is that neither require being charged in order to work. The Inknote does have a charging functionality, but that's entirely for the Bluetooth functions, and we'll get to that in a second. But let's start with the Boox stylus, and here it is. It has contact points there. You can barely see it. They're in light gray. That's where the magnet is, and it connects to the side of the device, the Ultra C. It's a very strong connection. You could actually, without the cover, connect this stylus to the device and it's never going to fall off. It's really that strong. It's one of the strongest connections actually I've ever seen with a tablet. In addition to that, there is a little eraser function. You can see that there. And this is a stroke eraser, which is not my preferred type of eraser, and it's not the best implementation of an eraser at the end of a stylus. I think that award goes to the Pro stylus with the Remarkable 2. That's actually a fantastic eraser. This one's okay. You know, it works. It's not. It's certainly nothing that I generally use. So that's the Boox stylus. The Inknote stylus, as we mentioned before, does have contact points, which you can see there. And those are the contact points that connect to the device. So this is where the stylus magnetically connects to the device. And this powers the Bluetooth function. And you can see there are 3 buttons, 1, 2, and 3, that are all programmable. So there's a number of options that you can set for the buttons. In my particular case, I set mine to do a lasso eraser. So I'll click on that, draw the area that I want to erase, and it works perfectly. I like that better than the eraser functionality on the Boox device. I also have a button that I click on to refresh the screen. And then if you double click on the power button, you actually get a laser pointer out of this end. What you would do with that, I have no idea. The best thing I've found out is to use it as a toy to play with your cats. So I see no functionality for the laser pointer as it relates to your device, but it's fun to be there. Why not? I do appreciate the fact that it has this Bluetooth functionality. And I appreciate the fact that while maybe the stylus doesn't feel quite as premium or as solid as the Boox stylus, it's still very comfortable to hold in the hand. And it's a little bit wider. It's a bit of a larger diameter from end to end. And that, to me, makes it a more comfortable experience to grip onto the stylus. So I prefer this stylus to the Boox stylus. And I'm going to give this advantage to the Inknote Plus. Now, having said that, the magnetic connection on the stylus is way weaker. It's not as good as the Boox magnetic connection. And in fact, it connects surely, but flimsily to the side of the device. So what that means is if you were to carry the device around, there's a high likelihood that any type of jarring would cause the stylus to detach. However, the case that is provided with the Inknote, and we'll cover the case later on, is as a flap which actually holds the stylus in place. So it covers up for that weakness, but I did want to make you aware that that was certainly the case. But again, regardless of that, I think in totality, I really prefer the Inknote Plus stylus. Point to Inknote. The Inknote Plus has now taken 2 categories in a row and just one more category to close out our first episode. Okay, in this particular segment, we're going to download the YouTube app. We'll compare the speed of download of installation on each device, and then we'll go in and do movies on each one as well. So let's go ahead and get out of standby mode on each system. And let's go ahead and go in to the Google Play Store. There we go. Let's go in here as well. And oops, we've got to pull up YouTube. There we are. Okay, and let's click on install on both simultaneously. Like so. There we go. And the Ultra C started downloading first and is a little bit ahead, but the Inknote is not that far behind. We're installing on the Ultra C. We're installing now on the Inknote Plus. Doo-doo-doo. This is all real time. And let's see. Okay, Ultra Plus is first. And the Ultra Color is first, or Ultra C. And the Inknote Plus is still working on it. It should be done any second now. Okay, very good. Clear advantage for the Ultra C. It downloaded just a hair quicker and certainly handled the install quicker as well. Let's go ahead and go into the app. All right, and before we go any further, let's go ahead and check our settings and make sure we have those set up the way we want it. So we are in extreme mode. Let's put refresh frequency on at 0. Very good. Okay. And then over here, we are on ultra fast mode. And we have dark color enhancement is about the same level on each device. Okay, excellent. Let's also look in here and let's turn the audio of this one off. And let's go over here and we'll turn, oops, went backwards, mistake. Let's turn the audio on about 2/3 of the way. Okay. Great, let's see if we can find a comp.
So, Facebook renames itself Meta in reference to the metaverse, makes that their whole identity, releases a couple VR headsets, and then Apple comes along with their own, much better headset.
All right, I clicked that by mistake. Let's see. All right, here we go. We have a rush video on both. Right off the bat, by the way, we see a little bit more ghosting over here on the Inknote Plus than we see on the Ultra C. Let's go ahead and see if we can start playing these at the same time. The audio currently is on the Inknote Plus. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take the audio off of the Inknote. And let's go ahead and put it on to the Ultra C. Again, we'll go about, that's a little high, a little lower. There we go. All right, and now we'll play the videos again. This time the audio will be coming from the Ultra C. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too loud. Let's go ahead and turn off the audio on both and we'll keep the videos playing. I'll make a couple observations that may be obvious, but just in case. Okay. I'm seeing ghosting on both screens. The ghosting is much more present on the Inknote Plus, but there's definitely ghosting over here on the Tab Ultra C as well. I don't know if you could discern it, but I think the speakers are much better on the Ultra C. Having said that, I would recommend using Bluetooth headphones on working with each device. That would give your best audio quality. It would be superior to the speakers, but the internal speakers are better on the Ultra C. The image in the Ultra C is darker than the image on the Inknote Plus. And as we see in other demonstrations, that makes this image look a little bit good at first glance, but you can see more detail because the image isn't as dark. And the darkness settings are the same on both devices. But overall, both of these devices do a pretty good job. Nice refresh rates. I don't really see any tangible difference there. The biggest difference at a glance is probably the ghosting on here and the quality of the speakers being a little bit better here. So I think that the advantage on the YouTube app goes to the Ultra C, but the Inknote Plus is certainly no slouch. It's doing a very competent job. Let me do one more run on the speakers. I'll turn the volumes down though, just in case there was distortion because it had been so loud. So let's go ahead and pause both. And we'll start here and we'll set the speakers to half, let's say. Maybe not quite half. There we go. I'll refresh the screen. All right, let's go over here. Set the speakers to just under half. There we go. And it's still a little loud. So let's go ahead and bring that down just a little bit. Okay. All right, there you go. That ends the demonstration for YouTube on these two devices, both very good. Advantage, though, to the Tab Ultra C. Episode 1 ends with the Inknote Plus with a slight lead, but the Ultra C is very close behind with a lot of categories to go. Well, that concludes the first of our 3-part series. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, please subscribe. That would help me out a lot. Click that notification button for these future episodes, and stay tuned. I think it's going to be a fun journey, so I'll see you next time.